Hello, you are tuning in to the Capsule in Conversation podcast, dedicated to women and their well-being. I'm Natalie Anderson, and today I'm joined by GP and menopause specialist, Dr Louise Newson, to talk confidence in menopause, changing the narrative, and education for all. So sit back, relax, and get ready to join us in our conversation. Hello all, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you've all had a great week. I cannot believe that we've reached the final episode of this series. I mean, where on earth have the weeks gone, eh? However, taking us out in style is an incredible woman who's been on my guest wish list for a number of years. Described as the medic who kickstarted the menopause revolution, she is on a mission to improve the global health of women and is the author of the #1 Sunday Times bestseller, The Definitive Guide to the Perimenopause and Menopause. As the founder of the acclaimed menopause support clinics Newson Health, she's appeared on numerous TV shows including BBC Breakfast, This Morning and Lorraine to give her expertise on women's health, and is also the host of the #1 self-titled podcast, the Dr Louise Newson podcast, where she discusses all areas of menopause. Widely trusted as a leading specialist in menopause care, her free menopause education programme for healthcare professionals has been downloaded by over 30,000 clinicians globally. She is spearheading the campaign for change, and it is my absolute pleasure to welcome her today. It is the brilliant Dr Louise Newson. Hi Louise!
Ah, what a lovely introduction, thank you.
Thank you so much for being with me today. I know you are a really busy lady, and as I said in my introduction, I'm so thrilled to have you because I feel like I've been waiting for so long, especially regarding this topic. You know, you are one of the #1 voices, the leading voice.
Oh.
So it's amazing to kind of have you with me.
Oh, well, great. So I hope I don't disappoint.
No, you won't. There's so much to discuss, you know, and thanks to women like yourself, we're now in a position where we're finally making advances in women's health. But it hasn't always been that easy, has it? I mean, if you think about the conversation 10 years ago, what was that like trying to get, you know, awareness for menopause care?
It's very different and difficult, actually. And it's not even 10 years, it's hundreds of years, actually. There's a lot of medical gaslighting, there's a lot of misogyny, there's a lot of suppression of women, and we know that. I just went to the Women's Revolt exhibition at Tate Britain at the weekend, and you know, I was born in the 70s, and in the 70s things were so different. There was no gender pay, you know, there was no equal pay for women and men. There's all sorts of things that were happening, and women were starting to get their voice then. And I feel like it's, you know, a lot of my work is just about empowering people with knowledge. That's all it is. And then they can make choices. But you can't make a choice based on misinformation or regurgitation of wrong data or just not being told. So I think we're very lucky. Like, I couldn't have done the work that I've done when I was a junior doctor, when we didn't have the internet, when we didn't have social media, you know. So I think, you know, women are desperate to know what's going on, and they deserve it. And so I'm very fortunate because I've worked as a medical writer for many years, and I've very evidence-based, and I've also got quite an inquisitive mind. So it's a real privilege being a doctor, but it's actually more of a privilege to be able to share the information that I have with others, and then they can decide. So I feel like this sort of revolution, as you described, has sort of happened because women are thirsty for knowledge. You know, we want to make a change, not just for ourselves, but for future generations. And I look at my 3 children and I think they're all girls. I don't want them to struggle to get their own hormones back, if that's what they want. Like, I don't want them to struggle to get the right job that they need or do the exercise that's right for them. You know, it's all part of choice, which sadly has been taken away from us when we think about hormones for far too long.
Absolutely. I mean, when you think about your hormones, I was just writing this kind of earlier, and we are governed so much and have been for so long about our hormones. It's everything. It's the foods that we eat. It's the stress levels. But yeah, I feel like it's only now that we're kind of starting to realise this. And what you were saying before about women across generations, like hundreds of years. When I think back to historical figures, you know, really powerful women, and yeah, kind of them being really tested, I often do think, you know, what was their reality? Like, what were they going through? Were they going through a perimenopause or going through menopause, when they were basically being, I suppose, almost crucified by the people around them and by a patriarchal society as well, and you've got to, I do have to think about that, the labeling of women and where that's come from, and the fact that women have often been, described as lunatics, because we're governed by the moon, so to speak. And changing that narrative is a hard road, it's a long road. But, for you, I know you wanted to be a doctor from being a very young girl, didn't you? I mean, you said you wanted to be an oncologist, and played doctors and nurses. What was it about the medical profession that you really wanted to do?
Yeah, I don't know, to be honest, because no one in my family has ever been a doctor. So it's not like I've seen anyone, because quite often, doctors are in generations. But I suppose I was interested in science, and it is that cliche of wanting to help people. And I just don't know. I just really wanted to be a doctor. And the school I first went to after my dad died was not particularly academic. And I knew that I just wouldn't be able to go and read medicine from that school. It just wasn't academic enough. And so it was a real drive to think, I can't just keep in this situation knowing that there's something else that I want. And I probably, as many listeners might realize, I'm quite determined and I'm quite single-minded when I want something. So I sort of worked my way out of the school and got a scholarship for a different, really good school for sixth form, which was great. But I think it's really difficult if there's something that you want that you can't have. And so much is unpredictable, of course, in life. And I suppose, I was lucky, unlucky, depending on how you see it. But when my dad died when I was only 9, my whole world crumbled. And I just thought, actually, the lucky bit is that I realized how unstable our present and our future is, and how you can't predict. But actually, that you need tools around you to make you as strong as possible. And often it's friendships, it's relationships, it's, all sorts of things. But then suddenly when your hormones go, again, that's something else. It is a grief, it's a loss. And I just got a message just now, actually, from someone who had told me that when she had her ovaries removed at a young age, because she had a family history of ovarian cancer, her ovaries were removed, and then she suddenly floored into this low mood, anxiety, terrible, cage of doom. And she was told it's because she's grieving her ovaries, not because her hormones are missing. And I just think, actually, like, there is so much that is wrong that we can't undo, we can't change, but we can change the knowledge and the way that we deal with that knowledge as well. And I think, not having my father's made me very independent. It's made me very determined. It's made me not reliable on people, because, I relied on my dad and suddenly he was gone. So, like, why should we, but having knowledge and tools to know what's going wrong, what's happening, and why am I feeling like this is really important, actually.
That is so interesting that you say that, because I also read that you once said, that you lost your self-confidence when you lost your dad. And actually, when we do think about a lot of women going through that transitional journey of menopause, the biggest thing they talk about is their self-confidence and that feeling of that. I suppose it is a loss of control of kind of everything's off kilter, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it is very scary. And lots of people do have this reduced self-worth, loss of confidence. And I think, a lot of women, not all, but a lot of us are the same, that we sort of, it sounds awful, we sort of have this self-sabotage thing going on, that we deserve to feel bad, and we're used to feeling bad. And it's not a woe is me. It's not like we want sympathy, but we're so used to having a difficult time, whether it's because we have difficult periods, or we've got PMS, or there's something, or we've had a hard pregnancy, or we can't get pregnant, or there's all these things that we just, it's just women's problems, so we can't really talk about it in public, and we just get on with it. And for certain cultures, it's impossible to talk about. But actually, we're still really strong underneath. We just need people to unlock that strength and help us. And I think what's happened, certainly in menopause, people haven't diagnosed it. And so, I mean, I dread to think people my grandmother's age who had stopped driving, who were hiding behind their apron strings, who really had to be there to prepare the meal for their partner to come home and, warm the slippers by the fire almost. And, but actually maybe they couldn't do anything else because they were crippled with this self-doubt, anxiety, everything else, but didn't realize it was related to their menopause because no one mentioned that word. Even my mother's generation, it was the change.
Yeah.
And even now we're still listening about this menopause transition, like we metamorphosize into some, amazing being. It's sort of like we've almost got to get through it. And so many women say, well, I've just been battling with my symptoms. I know they're not as bad as my mother, and I just feel I should just get on with it. And you think, well, how sad actually that we've got choices that could make us feel better, could make us healthier, yet we're sort of saying, no, we shouldn't have it. We don't deserve it. And it's quite an interesting psychology, I think, that goes on.
Well, there's lots of different thoughts on it currently, isn't there? I mean, there's been, in the media, we've had menopause as a disability, menopause linked to disease, then you've got menowashing, then you've got, the over-medicalisation of menopause. I mean, so much of it is so frustrating. I think I'm in the same boat as you in the sense that school of thought, which is when they're talking about the over-medicalisation of it. Like, if you have a headache, you want to take something for it, for pain. You want pain relief so you can get on with your job. So why wouldn't we want to manage our symptoms so that we can get on with the life that we want to live, but also function in society? You've got incredible women working in amazing jobs, and we want to keep them in those jobs. So it's important that we have that medical research into it, isn't it?
I totally agree. And I think when we think about our hormones affecting us, so we know most women have symptoms, which can last, sometimes quite a few years, but also the health risks associated with it. And we've got safe treatment, just replacing the missing hormones. It's not difficult medicine at all, yet the majority, about 95% of women in worldwide, are unable to access this evidence-based treatment. It just seems completely wrong. And you're right, there's a lot of conversation about workplace, for example. So we can think about flexible working or reduce our hours. Therefore, we have less pay, we have less status at work. And actually, most of us don't want to change what we're doing. Many women, it comes at a time when they've worked very hard in their career and they're really at the pinnacle and they want to, be promoted or to have a different job. But there are also a lot of young women. I've treated women who are now in their early 20s, but they've had symptoms for many years. So even at school, they were struggling to concentrate, struggling to sit down for long periods of time because they had vaginal dryness and soreness and didn't know how to talk about it because they didn't know what was going on. And so why do these women sort of not deserve to have access to treatment? It doesn't really make sense.
And in terms of your transition from being like teaching working in hospitals to then becoming a GP, what was it that made you want to make that transition?
It's a number of things, actually. Like you said, I really wanted to do oncology, so study of cancer. And I did an oncology job in Southampton many, many years ago. And I did really enjoy it, but it didn't quite feel holistic enough, and oncologists do a fantastic job and they focus on, the cancer, quite rightly so, getting good outcomes for that. But actually, there's a person beneath that, a person with emotions. And I just felt that I just wanted to do a bit more. And then it was more of a lifestyle as well, because staying in hospital medicine, working full time, I really wanted to be able to look after my children as well. Having lost my father at such a young age, I wanted to make sure I was there. My husband's a surgeon. And so I went into it thinking, well, I could probably do a bit more part-time, but I also wanted to try and find a really good role model who was a female. And I looked across all the hospital jobs, all the specialties, and it was really difficult then. It's easier now, but it was hard. This was in, the late 1900s, to find somebody who I thought, wow, I'd love to be like that. She's got a good marriage, she's got happy children, she's got a great job. And you can't have everything in life, of course. But I just thought, actually, a lot of people I'm looking at are burnt out, they're miserable, they're not happy, they're not really enjoying their job. And I actually said to some of the male consultants, I think I'm going to be a GP. And they just went, you know what, Louise, I wish I'd done that. And I thought, oh, that's really awful, because I've always enjoyed my job. It's a real honor to be a doctor. And actually, I wanted to keep that enthusiasm and that appetite for knowledge there because, you can never learn everything about medicine. There's always more to learn. There's always more papers. There's always more, that you can learn, and you learn from your patients every day. I love the clinical contact. So I just thought, I really don't want to be burnt out and resent my job. And actually, for a while when I was working as a full-time GP, it was really difficult. And I got to Friday night and just thought, oh, I'm going to have to talk to them again about their blood pressure, or they need a blood test. And you'd end up thinking, you can't treat people when you haven't got the energy yourself. And so, looking after yourself as a doctor is really important, but actually having the right job that you can be stimulated, you can work collaboratively with really good colleagues as well, is an absolute wonderful privilege. And it's not easy to find, but actually being a GP has enabled me to have this portfolio career where I've worked part-time as a GP, but I've also worked as a medical writer and a researcher and an educator, and I've been there for my children, which are, well, other than my husband, they are the most important people in my life. So it's really important.
And finding that work-life balance, I mean, gosh, it's like the holy grail of everything, isn't it? I mean, we all want it so badly, but it's just so hard to achieve. And obviously, like you say, you have come to a place where you are doing work that really stimulates you, and you do have a bit more balance with regards to, well, your children are now grown up and everything, but with your husband and your family life. But in terms of being a GP, when was it, or when were you starting to get the feeling that like women's health in particular was an area that you were like, I want to concentrate on this?
Well, it's interesting actually. When we talk about women's health, I'm actually more interested in health of women, and there's a nuance there, because women's health, people quite rightly think about other gynecological problems, so endometriosis, fertility, periods, whatever. And of course, I'm been trained in that part of my GP training, but I'm actually more interested in the health of women, so the heart, the cardiovascular health, the brain health, the bone health, because of my general medicine background. But I've always been interested in hormonal health and menopause because it's so rewarding to treat. Most people, not everyone, but most people who are on certainly the right dose and type of HRT, it's transformational when they've got symptoms, but also I know I'm investing in their future health. But I also found it very frustrating because I kept being told off for prescribing HRT where I worked, because the doctors had been trained to say HRT is dangerous. So we had this sort of conflict. And then the NICE guidance came out in 2015. And I thought, right, I need to read more about this, because everyone's saying mixed things, and it's a bit like anything. If you're not sure, then go back and read the original and work it out for yourself. So then I read this WHI study in incredible detail, which I knew the top line, but I hadn't read it properly. And then I just thought, this is awful. This is absolute disservice to women. And then I went to a conference, and Robert Langer, one of the investigators from the WHI study, said, let's get past this misinformation and hysteria about HRT and allow women to improve their health. And I just thought, you're absolutely right. There's no other study in the history of medicine that has caused so much disruption in women's health. And it was one study using the wrong type of hormones to the wrong type of women, but it's been translated to all types of hormones in all women, and it doesn't make sense. So it sort of infuriated me. And then I guess I started to sit in clinics, get a lot of more clinical experience and knowledge. And I just thought, wow, I really want to do this. But then I became perimenopausal, and I didn't recognize my own symptoms for quite a few months. And I thought, oh no, I'm just not clever enough. I'm not brave enough. I'm not, I had this loss of self-confidence, and I just kept saying to my husband, no, I'm just not going to do it. I can't do it. I'm too old to set up a company. I've got no business sense. I can't. And I was trying to write a website, and I kept feeling like I'd been drugged. I couldn't stay awake. And it took me a long time to realize. And then once I realized, and then once I got better, when I finally managed to see the right person and got the right dose and type of hormones for me, then I just thought, there's this injustice going on. This is wrong, that I've battled to get the right treatment, and it's affected me to the extent I was worried about giving up my job. So this is real life. This isn't just reading a paper. This is happening to women all the time. So then it just exploded, really.
And like you say, if somebody like yourself, which we probably look at and think, oh, she's quite invincible, she's like very confident and, she's on television, she's got an incredible business, but she's helped, like I was saying, like spearheading, and inside that person who is a very real human being dealing with the very real effects of perimenopause. And, it's something that we've really talked a lot about on this podcast over the last 4 or 5 years, because I'm really interested in making sure younger women know about this.
Yeah.
Because for me, and I've spoken about it a couple of times, where I've got friends that are having children, late 30s, early 40s, going straight into perimenopause symptoms, but then that not being acknowledged because people are going, oh, it's probably just the baby blues, or of course you're tired, you've got young children and you're, juggling a job. And when you think actually some of the symptoms are very similar with those things, but trying to get access to, well, can you at least test me or give me some kind of help where I can actually be taken seriously? Because I do think that's still a problem for younger women, is that they're not necessarily being taken seriously when they go with what they believe to be perimenopause symptoms. Do you think that's true?
Absolutely. And we see a lot of women in the clinic who have PMS and PMDD, which is the PMDD is just a more extreme version of premenstrual syndrome. And it's just a hormonal change. And so there are a lot of young women and girls who really do have hormonal changes, including my daughter, who I've done a podcast with. And it's not until the hormones are rebalanced that you think, wow, actually, I don't have to have this dip every month for 2 or 3 days or what have you. But also there's a lot of young women who have been given contraceptives, which are blocking natural hormones. So a lot of women are being sort of given, if you like, a chemical menopause. We know that some of the side effects of contraceptions can cause mood problems, low mood, anxiety, weight gain, poor sleep. And it's all related to our natural hormones being blocked. Yet we're not waking up and thinking about it. And I'm not quite sure why not, really.
Yeah, I mean, that is, you see, I never heard that before. And all the time that I've done this podcast, I've never heard that is happening. And that is something, again, that we need to discuss. It's like we talk about puberty, we talk about pregnancy, we make all these different kind of, allowances now within the workplace with regards to pregnant women especially, but we're still having to really struggle to get that same level of attention and care for probably women from about late 30s upwards and beyond to be taken seriously, in the sense that, brain fog, it is such a real thing, like you were saying within your job being perimenopausal, and then suddenly that lack of confidence. How, when women come to you, are suffering with things like brain fog, what would be your first kind of port of call? If let's just say it was a younger woman, kind of 40 years old.
It's really difficult because there's lots of reasons why people might have brain fog. And obviously, as a GP, we're used to trying to explore and find out, to hit the right history, work out, is there something else that's going on? But actually, often when women have the right tools, they'll know whether it's related to their hormones or not, because they'll often say, oh, I feel a bit like I did after I had my baby, that sort of cotton wool head, or it's not every day, but it's a few days of the month, then my period comes and I feel fine again, and I'm on it and I can exercise and I can work, and then suddenly I'm just like slumped in the sofa. And so when there's a change throughout the month, obviously the diagnosis is really there, it will be related to hormones. And whether it's PMS, PMDD, or whether it's perimenopause, it's just a hormonal change, actually. And so those women, often we do give hormones, and we've got the beauty of having the natural body identical hormones, which we can give separately. So some women it's estrogen they're missing, some women it's progesterone, some women it's testosterone, or it's a combination. But like we do with lots of things in medicine, we try and see if it helps. Blood tests can be quite unreliable, especially in the perimenopause, because hormones fluctuate. We often do a baseline testosterone blood test, and if that's low, it doesn't mean that brain fog is caused by the testosterone being low, but it means that someone could safely try testosterone and see if it helps. And we often do a blood test making sure that people aren't anemic, or they've got low iron, or their thyroid or vitamin D isn't low. So it's important to just not blame everything, obviously, on hormones. But often in medicine, it's a bit like if you had a headache, I would try one painkiller for you. If that didn't work, I'd try something else. And it's the same with some of these symptoms. And a lot of perimenopausal symptoms can be quite vague. You don't know. Are you tired because your husband's snoring? Or are you stressed because you've got a difficult line manager? And you don't often know until you've got your hormones rebalanced how many symptoms were related. And that's something that comes up a lot, that a lot of women say, I don't have many symptoms, but I've read the health benefits. I'm keen to start HRT before my symptoms worsen. And then they come back and go, wow, I hadn't realized my poor sleep, my joint pain, my dry skin was related to my hormones, but now that's all improved. So, that's the other thing, is there are so many symptoms that you don't always attribute to hormones.
And, let's just say, like, if, again, going to a GP practice, are you best asking for somebody that deals in women's health, and saying, like, okay, I need to speak to your women's health specialist, or do you have a menopause specialist? Because I know that now that is becoming more common than it was a few years ago, isn't it?
Yeah, and there are lots of people, a lot more doctors who are more confident in prescribing HRT and diagnosing as well. And, as you say, we've got our Confidence in the Menopause course that a lot of people now have downloaded and now understand a lot more how to help people. But there is still a minority of people who are really confident. And, I know doctors are really busy, and nurses and pharmacists, but this is something that affects half of their patient list at some stage. And so I think it's not just a female doctor or one doctor in the practice. It should be easier for more people to access, certainly to start the prescription. And then if people need the dose changing, the type changing, it's more complicated, then they could see a specialist then. But also, in our clinic, we have nurses and pharmacists that work with us. So doesn't always have to be a doctor. It can be nurses and pharmacists that might start treatment too.
And in terms of kind of, if you can't have HRT, what would be the other things that you would then look at with a patient?
Yeah, so it's interesting when we say we can't. There's nothing in medicine you can't. It might be that people think they can't, or it might not be the first choice for them.
Right.
But there's also, it's not this sort of HRT or not. HRT is part of menopause treatment, because for most people, menopause affects us for like 30 plus years. If you think the average age of the menopause is 51, the average age of death in the UK is about 82. So that's 30 years women will have without their hormones. But younger women, as we've said, will be even longer. So some women, it's more than half their life. So obviously hormones are important for those that choose to have them or want to have them or whatever. But also it is looking at other ways that we can improve our mental health, our physical health, our heart health, our bone health, our brain health. So we all know, obviously, eating is really important, but not eating the processed foods, trying to look at, sugar, obvious things, but also alcohol. A lot of people, their alcohol tolerance changes as they become older. Smoking, we shouldn't be doing, of course. Vitamin D, we all should be having for our bones. And looking at the type of exercise we do. And, our mental health is crucial as well. So it's part of everything, really. So HRT is one part of the puzzle, but there's no point me taking HRT and never exercising. If I never did any yoga, I think I'd probably be quite anxious. My brain would be all over the place, and actually I physically wouldn't be nearly as strong as I am. So, we've got to find out like a lifestyle that suits us as well, and that should be slotted in whether we take HRT or not.
It's like you've got to come to a place of acceptance as well to do a lot of those things, whether that's you're not 20 anymore, your body's changed, and it will change for each time. The exercise, you're not necessarily going to be able to run the way that we could because our joints are different. Yeah. And I think once the stigma is taken away from aging or being perimenopausal or menopause, once we get rid of that stigma of, oh, well, you're old and finished now, then it might be a lot easier for women to start making those lifestyle changes. Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. But I do also think it is related to hormones in so many ways. So if someone, for example, had an underactive thyroid gland, they would put on weight, they'd feel really tired and sluggish. You wouldn't say to them, right, start exercising, lose weight. You would say, right, let's give you your thyroid hormone back. And then at the same time, it will be easier then to make the right food choices, and you'll lose weight because your thyroid is really important for your metabolism. So doing it in conjunction is really important. There are a lot of women who think they can eat their way or exercise their way out of the menopause. And yes, of course, it will make you feel better whether you take HRT or not, but it's not going to replace the missing hormones.
So you've got to kind of, like you say, look at that overall 360 picture. Just going back to something else that you said about relationships, that is another huge aspect of menopause, isn't it? Family relationships, whether it's with children, parents. How do we, for you, like, again, working with your patients, how do we normalize those conversations with children, with partners, make it so that you don't feel ashamed to talk about kind of how you're feeling, or it's not, like you said right at the beginning, it's women's things. And I hate it when people describe that. It drives me mad.
I think it's really important, but actually, young people can talk about anything. They are really not embarrassed about talking in the way that my generation was and older generations have been. So just starting that conversation. I did a podcast with my 12-year-old because she was saying, well, you've done one with my, Jessica, who's 20, so I want to do a podcast.
Yeah,
really?
that's brilliant.
I was like, I don't know how I'm going to talk to you for half an hour about menopause. But anyway, she, if those of you listen to it, it's amazing. And she's just saying, yeah, everyone needs to know about it. Of course we do. And it's really invigorating because she will recognize people and say, certain teacher, I'm sure she's menopausal because the window's open and it's so cold and she's getting all flustered and whatever. But then she says, but isn't it a shame that she's not having treatment? Why can't she go and get help? And and I think they are the generation that are going to not just help themselves, but they will help others. So I think children, it's really important. And also, a lot of people find they become very irritable, very short-tempered, and children often get the brunt of it. And we know domestic violence increases in the perimenopause and menopause. And we know that it's so much harder to look after your children when you're perimenopausal or menopausal. So actually, if they can know that there's something happening and that, it's not just your mum having a bad time with you because you've done something wrong, is really important, actually. But then it's also, I think, really difficult for partners because the word menopause has always been a bit of a butt of jokes, really. Oh, she's menopause. Oh, she's hormonal. Just give her moment. But the last thing you want is to be ignored often when you're feeling very vulnerable and low. So it's having the right tools to be able to say, oh, darling, do you think some of this could be related to your hormones? And I've listened to this podcast, or I've read this book, or I've seen there's this app. Why don't we find more information together and wonder if there is treatment that might help you, because I'm worried about you, or you're not the same as you used to be, and do it in a really inclusive way rather than a let's get at you because you're turned into some monster overnight.
Well, the divorce rate, for example, is majority it kind of in the perimenopause and menopause years. Yeah, and you think if you could just have those conversations of understanding that you probably would have had if you've had children together, there would have been an element of that going through pregnancy. So there needs to be that kind of support and understanding, doesn't there, on a wider level, really. And I know obviously there's a lot going on television, on podcasts and everything, but it still does need to be kind of a global joint conversation, because it does affect everybody. It does, your work colleagues, even if it's not your wife or or your mum, or it could be the person that you work with.
No, you're absolutely right. And a lot of women, sadly, we see in the clinic, have already given up their job, their partner has left them, they have little contact with their family because of the way the menopause has affected them at home and at work. And it's so tragic when it's usually reversible and treatable.
Yeah. And in terms of the menowashing, so to speak, because everything you turn on is you could have this for menopause and you could do that for menopause. How do you feel about that?
Sad, actually. I feel a little bit responsible because I know obviously I've worked hard to allow the conversation to really be accelerated about menopause. But, I'm quite naive, really. I went in, as I said, to be a doctor to help people. I don't have any commercial interests. And certainly even with this job, I didn't do any paid work with pharmaceutical companies. I get asked a lot to be a face, a name, or a quote behind some product. And I absolutely don't. But I'm surprised how many people do, and also how many other doctors do. You can just see them on social media, they're paid for by, and you think, hang on a minute, what are we doing? What messaging are we giving to people? And I was in a beauty shop, I won't say which name, with my 12-year-old daughter, who said, and all this stuff's all over TikTok, isn't it? All the facial regime that they need, about 1,000 products, which is ridiculous.
Sephora kids.
Oh my God. And she said, oh, this one's really good. Look, it's been recommended by a doctor. I was like, oh, so anyway, I had a look, and this doctor has got a stethoscope around her neck, and she's a gastroenterologist, so she's a bowel specialist, but she's promoting some face cream. And I was just like, oh, Lucy, look, it's just like awful, actually. So I think the whole menowashing thing, when people are endorsing it without any evidence, is a concern. People do have vested interest because there's a lot of money. And I see and I understand it, because I struggled to get the right help initially. And I would have spent any money to just try and feel a bit better, and I know women are far more than just what their face looks like and what their hair looks like. But if you're feeling bad and your skin's dry or breaking out and your hair is really lank and dry and breaking and thinning, of course you're going to reach for some sort of beautifully labeled cream or shampoo, but it's wrong, because there's no evidence that these treatments are any more effective in menopausal skin than in my husband's skin, who clearly isn't menopausal. They will help because our skin's aging or whatever, but it's not because of the hormonal deficiency. So it's not really helpful, but these people are monetizing the fact that women are unable to receive evidence-based treatment.
And for me, it feels very much similar, like a similar kind of idea of the weight loss idea. When people, I mean, obviously we've kind of changed our outlook on body diversity, so to speak, but at the same time, those people that are very desperate to lose weight genuinely, and it's like, you can try this, and it feels like people are preying on extremely vulnerable people, doesn't it?
Absolutely, it does. And there's a huge amount that's being spent, but there's also, it fuels misinformation as well. So if a lot of people contact me certainly on Instagram, to say, oh, this products popped out because of all the algorithms. Is it safe? Should I be trying it? And actually, the money that's been spent is quite horrendous, really. And I feel like, it's just a shame. It's a real shame. And it doesn't seem to be slowing down. Everyone's having a bit of investment in all this. And I've never had external investment for anything I've done. So I don't know what it'd be like to have a venture capitalist on my back, but I can imagine it would be really difficult. Once you've started, you're sort of snowballing in, and then you can you've got this external pressure that you have to sell your product and market it well. And that's what's happening, sadly.
But I think that would equally then, like you've just said, almost stop you from doing your job. And for you, that's somebody that's really passionate about empowering others and about changing kind of the narrative around this properly without having that bias put on you. Going back to kind of what you said earlier about losing your confidence after your dad passing, but yet you've gone on to have this incredible career and are so successful in all of those endeavors. For anyone listening that might be struggling with various issues that might be going on in their lives, what things helped you? How did you get to that point?
I'm really self-critical, which probably is a good and a bad thing. So I would never dwell on the good things, which again is not always good. But I'm also really, really honest. So, this whole thing about don't judge a book by its cover. And, you look on social media and you think these people, and it's interesting, you talk about success and how do you measure success?
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? For me, I'm successful if my 3 children are happy and healthy at the same time. So I've had very few successful days because my oldest daughter's blighted with migraine. My other 2 have had problems, including one of them had sepsis. So that's for me success. But externally, people say, oh, because she's on This Morning, or she's, done this radio interview or whatever. And it's really, and I think it's harder for people because you don't know the real person. I think that's part of it. And so it's very easy to think that life is plain sailing. And most people have got some sort of backstory. But I think what I've always done wrongly or rightly is focused on the things I need to do, not the things I've done, because you can really rest on your laurels. And of course, it's nice to celebrate success, but actually, you've still got to be focused on what else you need to do. And I think maybe it is a women's thing, but I could be having a really good day, done a great something like education or media, or I've had a really good review of Balance app. Then I go home, well, the washing needs doing, the kids still need to get supper, still, the cat's been sick on the carpet. Well, it brings you right down, doesn't it? So but
it absolutely humbles you, doesn't it? You kind of go, oh, I was amazing for 5 minutes, and now I'm just normal again. Yeah, you're walking around, the halo slips off and everything else. Indeed. And I don't know about you, but I'm like carrying on in the house, and like the inner banshee comes out.
Yeah, but I think that's important that people know. And I have a privilege. I see lots of people who are, have high profiles, or they're celebrities, but I also see lots of people who don't have much at all. And one of the things I learned in medicine really early on is to not judge people and to treat everyone the same. And I think that is the most important thing to do, because there's lots of people, and you see it over social media, who are scrambling for fame, or they're scrambling for something, or success, whatever that might be. And then they lose their values and self-worth. And I've always thought I never want to change who I am just because of how people perceive me. And I think being true to your core is really important.
That's such a brilliant lesson, and a really important piece of information as well, in terms of, like, for all of us, like you say, is staying true to yourself and being the most authentic, rather than being influenced by all those external circumstances, and how do you relax? How do you kind of switch off and step away from things?
Well, doing yoga is really important for me. And when I've got my yoga mat, I haven't got my phone, I'm not distracted. And that is really important. So I'll often even just do 15 minutes when I wake up, or 20 minutes. And then I'll do a longer practice twice a week as well. So that is really important. I actually switch off quite a lot just by cooking, and being with my children is really important. But I've always been really geeky. Even when I was, when my dad was alive, they would always say, go and play, go outside and play. And I don't know, I'm working, I'm playing schools, I'm doing whatever. So I enjoy actually working. I enjoy reading papers. I enjoy meeting other people and having a sort of academic stimulation. So, and I don't drink alcohol. So my husband often says, gosh, you never switch your brain off, but I quite enjoy having an active brain, so I enjoy going out for walks. I enjoy being with my family, but I don't enjoy, going and drinking, because I think that's a waste of time. But that's my own personal, opinion. But I just like reading and learning.
Like the thirst for knowledge being stimulated. And just before we finish, if you had any words for your younger self, what would they be?
Don't be so cruel on yourself. I think don't be so hard, and don't dwell so much on negativity. You need a bit of that, because otherwise I think you're not in the real life. But I think, just think a bit about the good things that happen rather than just the negative things.
Oh, Louise, thank you so much. I'm very aware, like I said, that you're a very busy lady. So you've given me so much time. Thank you very, very much.
Oh, thank you. It's been great. Thank you.
I hope you guys have enjoyed being with us. I'm so thrilled that I finally had, got the chance to speak directly with you. So thank you. And again, I hope you guys at home have enjoyed our chat. For more from Louise, you can follow her on Instagram at menopause_doctor, or you can visit the Newson Health website at www.newsonhealth.co.uk. For more wellbeing and lifestyle from us, you can visit us at our website, www.thecapsule.co.uk, where you can also catch up with our previous podcast episodes by streaming from any of our podcast channels and YouTube. As always, please do feel free to leave your rates and reviews. I'd always love to hear from you whilst we're off air. You can also drop us a message on our Instagram at officialcapsule if you'd like to put any questions to our future guests, talk about any current guests, leave any messages about any of our previous episodes or content. I won't be back next week with another very special guest, but I will see you later on in the year, so I'm wishing you all a wonderful wonderful start to spring 2024. Thank you so much to all of my wonderful guests for sharing their stories and expertise this season. It's been so lovely to spend time with you all. Thank you to the wonderful teams at Distorted and Harrogate Springwater for your continued support. And mostly, thank you so much to you guys at home, our wonderful audience and community, for tuning in. I hope you found this season helpful and it's helped you to feel more empowered about your health and well-being. So for the final time this series, all that's left to say today is goodbye. So it's goodbye from Louise.
Goodbye.
And goodbye from me. Bye-bye.